Hello everyone, I want to share my story with you today. It's a story about betrayal and healing, but most importantly, it's about my sister-in-law, Shannon. Before I begin, I need to tell you that Shannon was once my dearest friend. We grew up like family, and her parents were practically my own. For 20 years, we shared everything. Our dreams, our fears, our deepest secrets. I thought we'd be best friends forever, until that fateful afternoon when I found her in bed with my husband, Zach. I can still remember every detail of that moment, how my hands trembled as I stood in the doorway, how my heart seemed to stop beating. I screamed and cried, while Zach just sat there looking somewhat embarrassed. But Shannon was different. She had this satisfied smirk on her face as she slowly got dressed and walked out of my house, as if she just won some twisted game. In that moment, watching her leave, I knew my marriage was over. Zach tried to defend himself with the most pathetic excuses. He claimed Shannon had seduced him, that he felt neglected by me, that he couldn't resist. They were all lies, and he knew it as well as I did. I couldn't even bring myself to grieve for our marriage. The disgust I felt toward him was too overwhelming. I couldn't even look at him anymore. But with Shannon, it was different. She had been my best friend long before I ever met Zach. One day, I confronted her, asking how she could do this to me after more than 20 years of friendship. Her response chilled me to the bone when she said it wasn't about our friendship at all, that it wasn't her fault my husband preferred her. She had the audacity to tell me she was simply a better match for Zach. When I asked if she felt any remorse for betraying our friendship, if she felt anything at all about sleeping with my husband, her response left me speechless. She asked why she should feel guilty, telling me it was my fault for not being able to keep Zach happy. With a cruel smile, she informed me that Zach was hers now, that they were in love, and he had promised to divorce me immediately to marry her. That's when it hit me. I had been nurturing a snake in my garden all these years, thinking it was a friend. She seemed so pleased with herself, telling me not to worry, that she and Zach would be happy together, and I could just watch from the sidelines. Then came her parting shot, advice she called it. That next time, I should find a man more on my level, because wealthy, handsome men like Zach would never stay with someone like me. Looking at her that day, I couldn't recognize the woman I'd called my best friend for 2 decades. It was like looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. I remembered how when I married Zach, Shannon had commented on his wealth and good looks, saying she wanted to find a husband just like him. I had reassured her then, telling her she'd find someone special soon enough. Well, she found someone all right, my husband. She had stolen him right from under my roof. From that day forward, Shannon was no longer my friend. She didn't seem to care at all, too content in her victory of sleeping with Zach and stealing my husband. When the affair came to light, everyone condemned Shannon and Zach. Even Shannon's own family was furious with her, temporarily cutting ties. Her brother Jesse, who had known me since we were kids, was particularly angry about what his sister had done to me. He stood by my side through it all, even helping me find a divorce lawyer. During those dark days after being betrayed by my best friend and facing divorce, I felt completely alone. That's when Jesse and I grew closer, and after my divorce was finalized, we began dating. Some people might think I was using Jesse as a rebound to heal my broken heart, but that wasn't the case at all. I waited a full year after my divorce before starting a relationship with him. Things progressed naturally, and eventually, we got married. We built a beautiful relationship without any complications, and our marriage has been even more wonderful than I could have imagined. He's so much better than my ex-husband in every way, and I'm truly happy. As for Zach and Shannon, they got married right after my divorce was finalized. To be honest, I didn't care at all. They deserved each other, 2 peas in a pod, as they say. Shannon had the nerve to send me an invitation to their wedding, which I promptly ignored. And when Jesse and I got married, I didn't invite her. She had thrown a tantrum when she heard about our engagement, which told me everything I needed to know. Things eventually settled down, and I had no contact with either of them. However, Jesse and his family gradually resumed limited contact with Shannon. What I'm about to tell you happened at a family gathering where both Shannon and Zach were invited. I knew they would be there, but I had decided to simply ignore them. Throughout the party, Shannon kept giving me these smug little smiles. While I avoided talking to her, she managed to corner Jesse for a private conversation. I was chatting with a cousin when I noticed Jesse and Shannon in what appeared to be a heated argument. Though I had no intention of speaking to Shannon, I couldn't help but overhear their conversation. She was telling Jesse she couldn't understand what he saw in me, saying he should have listened when she told him to break up with me. Jesse firmly told her to watch what she was saying, reminding her she had no right to voice any opinions. Shannon then predicted that Jesse would eventually get bored with me, calling me dull and unattractive, even suggesting I had married him just to get revenge on her. Jesse defended me, saying his wife wasn't a spiteful person like her. Shannon exploded, telling Jesse he should be more grateful to have a sister who had married a successful man. Then she referred to me as damaged goods, saying it was sad that Jesse had settled for someone like me. Her words cut deep, and I felt utterly insulted. She was being deliberately cruel and sarcastic. While I tried to ignore her comments, Jesse couldn't contain his anger. He was furious about his sister speaking ill of me and immediately confronted her. The argument escalated quickly, and I could see how angry my husband was getting. Knowing his blood pressure tends to spike when he's angry, I grew concerned. I quickly led him out to the garden to help him calm down. Then I decided it was time to have a word with Shannon myself. I told her she needed to learn some manners. I warned her that speaking ill of me to my husband wasn't a wise move. Shannon claimed she was just trying to save her brother from me, asking why I was so angry. I reminded her that someone who destroys marriages has no right to give advice to others. When I asked why she thought I couldn't make Jesse happy, she just repeated that cruel phrase about her brother deserving better than damaged goods. I felt a wave of relief knowing that Jesse wasn't shallow like his sister. I told her how grateful I was that he was a good man who didn't share her disgusting views. Shannon then had the nerve to tell me I should be more concerned, suggesting I was the type of woman who couldn't keep a good man. She brought up Zach, calling him a wonderful man that I had let go. I had to laugh at that one, reminding her that I hadn't let him go. He had cheated with her, or had she conveniently forgotten that part? Shannon defended herself, saying I had no right to blame her. She then had the audacity to claim that women like me couldn't keep good men because we didn't give them enough love or attention. According to her, poor Zach hadn't received enough love and care, so she had to step in. She boasted that he had come to her because she was simply better than me. I couldn't believe how she loved pointing fingers at everyone else. I told her how shocking it was to see she'd become even more toxic than before, adding that it was laughable to think I once considered her a good friend. I said she and Zach deserved each other, which made her laugh. I hadn't planned to engage with her anymore, but then she approached my husband and started making snide remarks right in front of him. The whole situation felt surreal, and I was at a loss for words. Jesse was clearly irritated and embarrassed, but he didn't want to cause a scene at the family gathering. Thankfully, the other guests were out of earshot and hadn't noticed what was happening. Zach was busy chatting with a cousin, completely oblivious to the situation. While he had wisely kept his distance, his foolish wife couldn't take the hint. She looked at me with mock pity and said she could see how jealous I was of her. I had to set her straight, telling her I had zero interest in my ex-husband anymore. I explained that Jesse was twice the man Zach would ever be. Shannon acknowledged that her brother was a good man but couldn't resist pointing out that he wasn't as wealthy as her husband. She suggested I must be jealous of that. I had to repeat myself. I had absolutely no interest in my ex-husband. I told her I'd already experienced marriage with him and it hadn't been enjoyable at all. She dismissed my words, saying of course I would say that since my ex-husband had remarried someone like her. Shannon bragged about being a better wife than I ever was, claiming Zach had always looked bored during our marriage but now praised her as a wonderful wife every day. I told her that was fine if he was being nice to her, but I couldn't understand why she thought I would care. She insisted I must be angry because the truth hurt, and I was jealous of her. Then she dropped what she thought was her trump card, boasting that Zach loved her more than he ever loved me, claiming he had bought her 3 houses. That's when something clicked in my mind. During our divorce, I had discovered that Zach was drowning in debt. He had student loans, credit card debt, and medical bills piling up. He wasn't earning much, and his debt was overwhelming. All his assets had been used up in our divorce settlement, which was why he had agreed to transfer 3 houses to me instead of paying alimony. While I hadn't received any cash settlement, I had gotten those houses in my name. At that moment, I realized how completely unaware my sister-in-law was of her husband's true financial situation. I decided to play along, saying how impressive it was that he could afford 3 houses. Shannon smugly replied that while it might seem like a lot of money to me, it was nothing to him, asking if I remembered how wealthy he was. I couldn't help but point out that when we were married, we hadn't lived a particularly luxurious lifestyle. She dismissed this with a wave of her hand, saying Zach hadn't thought I was worth spoiling, but he pampered her. Then she proudly announced that he had promised to transfer 3 houses to her name very soon. She pulled out her phone, saying, "Just look how beautiful they are." As she showed me the photos, I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. The houses Shannon was showing me were actually the same 3 houses I had received in my divorce settlement. These properties had never been solely Zach's to begin with. While his name had been on the deeds, mine was there too because I had invested my own money in renovations and furnishings. During our divorce, Zach hadn't been able to come up with the cash settlement he owed me. That's why he had been forced to transfer these 3 houses to me as compensation. When this arrangement was first proposed, he had fought it tooth and nail, not wanting to give up his best assets. But when he realized paying alimony would cost him even more, he had finally given in. I had preferred getting everything in one lump sum anyway, wanting as little future contact as possible with such a despicable man. So here was Shannon, showing me pictures of houses that I already owned. I couldn't tell if she was lying or if my ex-husband had actually promised her these houses. But it was clear she was trying to make me jealous. Instead, she had handed me the perfect opportunity for revenge. The thought made me burst out laughing. She stared at me, surprised and confused, demanding to know what was so funny. I told her she had just told the most hilarious joke. I explained that there was no way Zach could give her those houses. Shannon bristled, saying she knew I was just jealous and asking if I thought she was making it all up. I assured her I didn't think she was lying at all, but repeated that Zach simply couldn't give her those houses. She accused me of saying this out of jealousy, claiming I couldn't stand seeing how Zach was sharing his wealth with her. Shannon was deliberately trying to provoke my jealousy. She clearly wanted to believe I still envied her, that stealing my husband had been her greatest triumph, and she wanted to flaunt it in my face. But her plan backfired spectacularly. I felt nothing for my ex-husband anymore except relief at being free of him. So I calmly told her that while I didn't care what assets he shared with her, he simply couldn't give her these particular houses. She demanded to know why not, insisting that even if the houses were expensive, Zach loved her so much that money was no object. I looked at her with pity and said, "Oh, poor Shannon." I explained that no matter what she tried, Zach couldn't transfer those houses to her because he wasn't their real owner anymore. She protested immediately, insisting that they were his houses, suggesting I only knew about them from my time being married to him. I had to smile at that, telling her that yes, she had tried to steal my husband and secure a luxurious lifestyle for herself. It had been quite a grand plan, I told her, but things weren't going to work out the way she'd hoped. I explained that while Zach had indeed owned these houses once, that wasn't the case anymore. When she demanded to know who owned them now, I delivered the knockout blow, "You're looking at the owner right now." Shannon's eyes grew wide with shock. She looked like she had just been told pigs could fly. She had clearly been planning to show off these houses as proof of her husband's wealth, but she had been deceived. In her attempt to fool me, she had been fooled herself. Still refusing to accept reality, she sputtered that it couldn't be true, that I must be lying. I asked her why she thought that, telling her that while it might be hard to believe, I was simply stating facts. She demanded to know how I had gotten the houses, her voice rising with hysteria. I calmly explained that it was part of the divorce settlement. I got the houses, and he avoided depleting his savings or paying alimony. Shannon's world was crumbling as she asked why he would promise her something he couldn't deliver. I told her gently that she had been deceived, that Zach had been lying to her. She insisted on confronting him right then and there. I hadn't planned on speaking to my ex-husband again, but this was a special circumstance. It was the perfect opportunity to watch these two traitors face their moment of reckoning. Shannon was completely losing her composure. I decided to stay put, worried she might cause an even bigger scene if I left. She dragged Zach over, demanding, "She's making things up, Zach. She claims she owns the 3 mansions you promised to give me. Tell her she's lying." I couldn't help but marvel at her continued denial, telling her I didn't have the energy or interest to make up stories about her. Shannon snapped at me to be quiet, accusing me of deflecting because I was afraid of being exposed as a liar. She turned to Zach, begging him to tell me I was lying, to confirm the houses were his and he'd promised them to her. Zach looked like a deer caught in headlights. He clearly hadn't expected to have this conversation here, in front of everyone. I could tell from his reaction that he had indeed been lying to his wife about owning these properties. I smiled at him sweetly and suggested he tell the truth, asking why he would tell his wife the houses were his when we both knew that wasn't true. He stammered, unable to form words. Shannon pressed him desperately, begging him to tell me I was lying, to confirm he hadn't been dishonest with her. Finally, he admitted, "Actually, what she's saying is true." The look on Shannon's face at that moment was absolutely priceless. Her eyes were wide with shock, her expression a perfect picture of disbelief. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was avoiding eye contact with everyone. He was probably feeling embarrassed about being caught, and he knew all too well how dramatic Shannon could get when she was angry. Shannon was furious now, demanding to know if it was true that he had given me 3 houses in the divorce. When he confirmed it had been the best solution at the time, she kept pressing him, asking why he had lied to her. She couldn't understand why he had promised her these houses. He finally admitted that he knew she would lose her mind if she discovered how little money he actually had left. Shannon exploded, screaming about his deception. That's when Zach turned on her, accusing her of marrying him for his money and tricking him into divorcing me. He said he now saw exactly what kind of woman she really was. Shannon started screaming, and they began fighting right there at the party. Everyone turned to stare as they argued like children. I just stood there watching it all unfold. Later, when I explained everything to my husband, he couldn't help but laugh. The scene Shannon and Zach created was so disruptive that they were eventually asked to leave the party. A few weeks later, Jesse told me Shannon was divorcing Zach. Apparently, they hadn't stopped fighting since that day, and Shannon had finally understood the reality of Zach's financial situation. Zach was angry that Shannon had married him for his money and was now leaving him because he had none. But here's the most ironic part. Shannon ended up having to share Zach's debt. The law required a 50-50 split of all debt accumulated during their marriage. She had thought she was marrying a wealthy man, but instead, she had been accumulating debt for her future. Now Shannon was paying back all the money Zach had spent on her. As for Zach, karma caught up with him too. He lost the woman he had chosen over me, and he realized he should have stayed with me. He even called me, begging for reconciliation, saying no one would ever love him as much as I had. But I'm not the type to take back a cheater, and I have a husband now who's worth 10 of him. Jesse and I decided to cut ties completely with Shannon because of her behavior toward me. Even though I had gotten my revenge that day, it didn't make her actions any more forgivable. She's just a toxic person, and neither Jesse nor I want anything to do with her. She rarely shows up at family gatherings anymore because most people have stopped inviting her. Now that she's single again, some of our cousins worry she might try to steal their husbands like she did mine. I advised them to be cautious because she had proven herself untrustworthy. In the end, Shannon tried to make me miserable, but she ended up facing the consequences of her own actions. That day, she finally paid the price for her betrayal. It's been 2 years since that day. Jesse and I now live in a new town, where we bought an old house that we're renovating together. On weekends, Jesse picks up his tools while I spread out my interior design books, and we discuss our dreams for our perfect home. I decided to convert those 3 houses from my divorce settlement into support facilities for single mothers. When I was at my own crossroads, so many people helped me through it. I wanted to use that experience to help others who are struggling like I once did. The facilities are thriving now, with more than 10 mothers and their children starting new lives. Every time I see their smiling faces, I know I made the right decision. Recently, Shannon's children came to visit the facility. I heard she has remarried and lives in a different town now. The children call me a kind auntie and look forward to their visits. I hugged them close and told them, "This place will always be here for you. If you ever need help, just come." When I see their innocent smiles, I feel the old anger and hatred slowly melting away. While I haven't completely forgiven Shannon, I can at least show warm love to her children. I've also become close to a volunteer at the facility named Maria. Like me, she experienced betrayal by her spouse. But she overcame that pain and now works as a child welfare specialist. "We can't change the past, but the future is in our hands," she told me once. Those words resonated deeply in my heart. True, the pain of betrayal doesn't easily fade. But I've come to realize that those experiences made me who I am today. Jesse is happy about how I've changed. "You've grown so strong," he tells me, "but you never lost your kindness." That's the woman I love. I smiled at his words and replied, "I got here because you were by my side." The other day, I spotted my ex-husband visiting the facility from a distance. He had aged considerably. But I felt nothing in my heart. Just a quiet understanding that he too had learned life's lessons. The same goes for Shannon. I heard she's found a job and supports herself now. Ironically, her punishment may have been being forced to become independent. Sometimes, sitting on the facility's terrace at sunset with a cup of tea, I reflect on how life takes unexpected turns. But every experience we encounter on that journey has meaning. My new friends, the mothers and children at the facility, and most of all, my loving husband. The bonds with the people around me have grown deeper and stronger than ever before. Happiness doesn't always come in perfect packages, but it's up to us to grab it, I often tell the mothers at our facility. Those words are also encouragement to my past self, who was once betrayed and hurt. This is the path I've chosen, and I have no regrets. Rather, it was through these experiences that I learned what true happiness means. Yes, life has a way of giving us unexpected gifts. With this belief, I take another step forward, hand in hand with Jesse, our hopeful future.